keep stacking days. Just keep stacking days. As long as you keep stacking days, I promise you, you will see the change. But my coach used to always say, everything that you want is on the other side of hard.
Most people completely misunderstand what success actually is because they imagine it as a sudden breakthrough moment where everything changes instantly, where one decision, one opportunity, or one lucky break transforms their entire life overnight. But in reality, success is not a moment at all. It is the accumulation of countless invisible days that most people are too inconsistent to ever respect. And that is exactly why they stay stuck, while others slowly become unstoppable without anyone noticing in the beginning. Chris Paul's level of performance is not built in highlight moments. It is built in thousands of repeated days where nothing feels exciting, nothing feels special, and nothing feels dramatic. Yet he still shows up and performs at a standard that does not drop just because the environment is ordinary. And that is the part most people never understand, because they want results that feel big while refusing the boring repetition that actually builds those results. Stacking days is not motivation. It is identity formation through repetition that refuses interruption. And most people fail not because they are incapable, but because they keep breaking their own rhythm. Every time life becomes slightly uncomfortable, every time they feel tired, every time they lose interest, and every time they convince themselves that restarting later is the same as continuing now. When in reality, every restart is a silent destruction of momentum that they will never recover. And that is the real separation between people who change their lives and people who only talk about change. One group stacks days even when nothing feels rewarding. The other group only acts when they feel like it. And those two lives never become the same.
And you'll have a couple false starts here and there, but at some point you're going to get a little bit of a chain going, right? You get 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 days in a row. And at that point, your only goal becomes to don't break the chain.
The idea of improving by even 1% every day is not soft progress or motivational comfort. It is a system of compounding discipline that becomes more demanding the longer you ignore it, because it only works when it is protected from interruption. And most people never experience its power because they keep breaking it before it has time to build anything meaningful. James Clear's principle is not about improvement. It is about continuity. And continuity is something most people cannot handle because it requires them to repeat actions long after excitement disappears, long after motivation fades, and long after the initial emotional push is gone, which is exactly where most people collapse. Not at the beginning, but in the middle, where nothing feels rewarding anymore. And this is where the dangerous truth appears. You are not losing because you are incapable. You are losing because you keep resetting your identity every time discomfort shows up. Every skipped day does not just remove progress, it teaches your mind that discipline is optional. And once discipline becomes optional, it eventually disappears completely, because the brain always chooses the easier path unless it is trained not to. And that training only happens through uninterrupted repetition that most people never sustain long enough to experience real change. Stacking days is not about doing more. It is about refusing to break the chain. It is about continuing when your mind wants to negotiate, continuing when your emotions want to quit, continuing when nothing feels significant enough to justify effort. Because in reality, nothing valuable ever feels significant while it is being built. And the people who understand that become dangerous over time because they are no longer dependent on motivation. They are dependent on structure, and structure does not break just because life gets difficult.
But what you can do right now, and what I wish I'd have taken more seriously when I was in high school, is accountability for myself, taking on the discipline to actually stack days. That's why I wear this phrase, stacking days, on my shirt. You're just stacking days of consistency and building upon them. And so I wasn't, like I said, not that good of an athlete, but I've stacked all of these days of consistency, of getting up at, as I've had more kids, we've got 3 of them now, I got to get up earlier because they wake up in the middle of the night, and there's not a whole lot of time for training because I still got a business to run and all these other things. But as I've built upon those days of running, when I get 2-3 hours of sleep, over time, it's not really a pretty thing.
Life eventually becomes heavy for everyone, and when that moment arrives, it does not care about your intentions, your plans, or the version of yourself you promised you would become. It only reveals what you actually built through repetition when nobody was watching. And that is where stacking days either becomes your advantage or your exposure. Because pressure does not create character, it reveals it. When things get difficult, most people do not fail suddenly. They collapse gradually through lack of accumulated discipline, through inconsistency they ignored, through days they skipped thinking it would not matter, and through standards they lowered little by little until they no longer had anything strong enough to hold them together when life demanded more from them. But the people who stacked days differently survive those moments differently, not because they are stronger in emotion, but because they are stronger in structure. They already built the habits that pressure tries to force out of others. They already trained themselves to function without comfort. They already developed discipline in environments where nothing was easy or exciting. So when life becomes unpredictable, they do not panic, because their identity is already reinforced through repetition. And that is the real meaning of stacking days. It is not about progress when life is easy, and those few are not chosen by talent, petition, by consistency that refused to break when it would have been easier to stop. And that is why stacking days eventually becomes the difference between collapse and control. There comes a point where life stops being gentle and starts demanding proof, where pressure increases without warning, where responsibilities multiply, where emotions become irrelevant, and where only one thing actually matters anymore. And that is whether you have been stacking days or simply talking about what you are going to do someday. Because when life gets heavy, it does not negotiate with your potential. It does not care about your excuses, and it does not wait for you to feel ready. It only exposes what you have been building in silence. And if you have been inconsistent, if you have been restarting, if you have been breaking your own rhythm every time things got uncomfortable, then that moment becomes the moment everything collapses at once. But if you have been stacking days, everything changes. Because pressure does not break you when you are built on repetition. It only reveals you. The discipline you practiced when nobody was watching becomes the stability you rely on when everything starts shaking. The standards you maintained on ordinary days become the foundation that holds you together when extraordinary pressure arrives. And that is where most people realize too late what stacking days really meant. It was never about motivation. It was never about inspiration. It was never about feeling ready. It was about building a version of yourself that does not fall apart when conditions are not perfect. And this is why time becomes the real test. Not talent, not intelligence, not opportunity. Time is the only thing that exposes whether you were consistent or inconsistent, whether you were building or restarting, whether you were progressing or simply existing in cycles of temporary effort, followed by long gaps of inactivity. So the question is no longer what you want to become. The real question is what you have already been becoming through your actions up to this point. Because you are not going to suddenly change your life one day in the future. You are going to arrive there as the result of everything you are stacking right now. And if you are not stacking days, you are not building anything at all.